In December 1975, a few days before Christmas, Norman Peter Gibbs, a property developer, musician and aeroplane fanatic, arrived on the island of Mull with his girlfriend, 32-year-old lecturer Felicity Granger. They stayed at his favourite hotel on the island and found out from the manager he could rent a plane locally. This would be a Cessna 150, which they went on to use to look at property on the island. On Christmas Eve, the night before his 55th birthday, he took off, leaving his girlfriend at the hotel. He was never seen alive again. Gibbs and Granger had taken the ferry from Oban to Mull, arriving at the Glenforsa Hotel, near Tobermory, on 20th December. The couple stayed in room 14, and on that night had dinner and wine after flying to Broadford on Skye earlier in the day to view property. So why did Gibbs decide to go flying afterwards in deteriorating wintry weather? He was known to be a thrill-seeker, and he spoke to Granger about night landings being possible at the hotel's 780-metre airstrip, even without the runway having lights. Having an air link would bring in wealthy clientele if he found a property on the island. The Howitt family ran the hotel, and David Howitt was in charge of the airstrip. That evening, around 9:30, he heard a plane engine spring to life. Not expecting to hear it, he made his way to the door of the bungalow where he lived at the airfield, grabbed a pair of binoculars and pointed them at the strip to investigate. He saw the lights go off, on and off again. Then the plane took off, disappearing behind some trees. Meanwhile, Granger stood at the end of the runway with a couple of powerful battery-operated lights to guide him back. Some eyewitnesses from the hotel believed they saw two people moving torches on the runway, while others thought Gibbs had spent a long time warming up the engine before taking off. Paperwork, too, was called into question. Gibbs' private pilot licence had expired. He'd lied to the owner of the plane, Ian Hamilton, saying he did have one, but hadn't brought it with him, as he hadn't expected to be flying. It seemed plausible enough to Hamilton, who had purchased the Cessna F-150H that September, usually keeping it at North Connell Airport near Oban. Hamilton had taken him at his word. The plane never returned. Granger returned to the hotel around 10 p.m, and 2 hours later the police were called. Meanwhile, Howitt had begun to suspect something was wrong after the plane didn't come back after 10 minutes. Thinking Gibbs may have ditched in the water, he went out to have a look. In the driving sleet, he drove the hotel's car, but knew that with the deteriorating weather conditions, the plane wouldn't be able to land. He looked for lights, thinking he may have overshot the runway, but saw nothing. Over the rest of Christmas, a full search got underway, with the locals, the police, the RAF and Naval Air Service helicopters, and the RAF Kinloss Mountain Rescue Team, which was in Fort William at the time, all searching for Gibbs and the Cessna, but to no avail. It was only the following April that finally Gibbs was found by a local shepherd, Donald McKinnon, his body lying straddled across a fallen tree around 400 feet up a hillside. Yet another shepherd, Robert Duncan, had walked past the spot several times in the meantime with his dogs, and there had been nothing there. How he got there remains subject to conjecture. He was just a mile from the airstrip and the hotel. There was still no sign of the missing plane. McKinnon had to saw the tree to release the body, which was held together just by the clothing. It was badly decomposed, and it was surmised he'd come down the hill, but had fallen. Many years later, a former girlfriend asked to be shown where his body was found. Where his head had been, his scalp had detached from the skull, and the girlfriend put some of it into a plastic bag and took it away with her. A fatal accident inquiry was held in 1976. It was found there were no traces of seawater on the body, although he'd been lying exposed for a considerable amount of time, with rain possibly clearing away any salt water. Nor did he suffer trauma as would be expected from the impact caused by a crash. He only had one minor injury to his left leg. The post-mortem was carried out by Dr. McClay, the CMO of Strathclyde Police in Glasgow. What he found strange was that the body hadn't turned up near to the crashed Cessna, and Gibbs was pretty much unscathed. There was no evidence he'd died anywhere other than at the tree, and toxicology came back clean. The cause of death was cited as exposure, as nothing else could be determined. The Procurator Fiscal, Graham Pagan, concluded that the inquiry had taken some of the mystery away. However, until the plane is found, then the mystery will remain. 10 years later, in September 1986, the remains of a red and white Cessna were found in the Sound of Mull, 100 feet below the sea, and around 300 yards from the shore. A local diver, George Foster, had found a plane matching the missing Cessna. Richard and John Grieve of the Glencoe Mountain Rescue Team, who've dived in the area, believed the found plane was indeed the Cessna. They had seen the windscreen had been put out, but the doors were locked. They also confirmed its registration as G-AVTN, the number of Hamilton's Cessna. There is no information on where Gibbs flew the plane, but plenty of speculation. What is known is that he wasn't wearing a parachute, and it's highly unlikely he jumped considering his lack of injuries. Another theory is that if Gibbs had ditched the plane and he'd been in the water at 9 degrees Celsius, he may have been able to swim towards the shore. By that time, though, he would have been confused and losing body heat in the cold water. Blood would have started to drain from his brain as soon as he stood up on dry land, making his thinking distorted, and this would have led him to become disorientated. As a pilot, Gibbs would have known to get to higher ground to get his bearings, but the weather conditions were horrendous for such a climb. A possible timeline for events is that the Cessna crashed. He escaped by swimming to the shore, then clambered up the hill to see where he was in relation to his hotel, or to some other landmark he knew, perhaps the lights of the town. But then he made a fatal mistake. Tired, he may have decided to rest, and when he got up, slipped, fell, and didn't have enough strength to go any further, dying of exposure, alone in the sleet on Mull. We may never really know what happened that Christmas Eve in 1975. If you enjoyed this episode of Scotland's History, Please like, comment and subscribe. Until next time, thank you for watching.